Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2020 Spellslingers Championship Tourney. Today we are going to be casting for the match between EverCryTCG and a substitute opponent who will be known as Garbage or Rat from this point on, as they have not submitted an official name. I am joined here today with my good associate, Lord Kyrus.
You were the first person that did not pronounce that incorrectly on purpose to spite me.
I almost did, not gonna lie.
It's hard to resist.
Just making sure
Still
everything
can't
is
see
in
Rat's
order.
hand.
It appears that once again, Unearth and Capital Punishment have been top-decked by EverCryTCG, this time being accompanied by Kaylee, Rise Again, and Door of the Undead, which leads me to believe that this is a zombie deck with some water thrown in there for fun. And once again, there's going to be the water air deck from Rat, who appears to have gotten not the best mulligan, taking Skeleton Key and Belt of the Diamonds, both very specific uses. Let's see if he can apply those to the best of his abilities.
It'll be interesting to see what the zombie deck can do with a little bit of board control added from the water.
That is true. I wonder if they have brought along any cards like Portal to Somewhere, which would actually be a very interesting play, to say the least, for a zombie deck.
I think that he does have portaled somewhere in this deck because I've seen him play a practice match before the tournament began against Henri, and he definitely used that.
It appears, interesting. Rat has actually taken both the Mana Stones of Order in his first 2 mana, which is quite useful if I do say so.
Oh, first ally play of the game.
That is going to be Kaylee, Devil's Advocate, who has the Snap ability to target ally deals damage to itself equal to its attack. That's especially useful against very strong allies, or especially the Elder Gods that come to mind, which usually have an equal attack to HP ratio.
One other thing that I will comment on is that it is especially helpful against allies with swordsmanship.
Interesting, a little confusing here is that 3 Mana Stones of Order have been drawn. I'm not entirely sure if that is provisionary of the rules. Another Mana Stone being drawn. The early game is usually somewhat slow like this. Kaylee will be making an attack to Rat directly for 200. Unfortunately, they will be exhausted due to the lack of a steadfast ability. Hopefully, Rat can get his Mark IV Crusader out in time, but he might make an interesting play with Alaria.
Seeing a 4th Mana Stone of Order.
Very interesting. I'm assuming that there is some compromise coming here from the from EverCryTCG, as he is, of course, as you may know, the creator of the game. So there must have been some delegation going on to allow this many Mana Stones of Order.
I'm 98% certain that's not legal.
But, you know, we're just out here for a good game. So we're just going to say, why? Nobody's ever done that. And move along with our day. Have expended 4 mana to play Alaria Swiftshaper, a legendary. When they come into play, he may search his spellbook for a water spell and remove it from play and shuffle the deck, then put the removed card on the top of the deck, ensuring the next...
This allows him to get some quick area control.
Indeed, especially for something like Portal to Nowhere. And especially since this is not a demonic contract, he will not have to sacrifice a second Portal to Somewhere if he has it anywhere in his deck. Fortunately, he did put it in the wrong discard, so his opponent will be able to see what card he is taking and replacing to the top of his deck, which is Arcane Revelation, which does have...
Not the move, Chief.
Interesting card on on a twist for just a basic card such as, what am I looking for here? Runic Examination, which you just draw 2 cards. That one has a rebound where you can sacrifice 3. So very interesting. Might come in handy, especially playing with an air deck, which specializes in putting out a lot of small cards rather than a few large ones or other such.
In my experience, air decks tend to be more geared towards putting out an average amount of medium strength cards as compared to zombie decks, which put out a lot of low HP cards, and earth decks, which are about buffing up larger scale allies.
It appears that Capital Punishment has been used in the early game here against Alaria, or Alaria, depending on how you like to pronounce it, leaving Kaylee free to make another 200 damage attack towards garbage directly. And as we see now, that Arcane Revelation has been drawn from the deck and added to his hand. The question now is, will he play the Crusader, or will he take an action with one of his spells?
I think his best option at this point would be to use Handy Miscalculation. You can get some of the more expensive cards out of the way and hope for some usable cards now, since he has limited mana.
He's expending 3 mana there to play Arcane Revelation, rather. Drawing 2 cards. No response.
Looks like Ice Wall and an additional Skeleton Key.
Interesting choice to have 2 skeleton keys, and an even more interesting one.
It's interesting to see 2 Skeleton Keys in a non-zombie deck, more accurate.
Right. Looks like that is the end of his turn. He will not rebound it.
Belt of Diamonds is in play now.
That is true. He can rebound it for a more simple, less potentially costing action. Another attack coming from Kaylee to Rat directly for another 200. The question I have is, why has the Mark IV Crusader not been put out? That will shut down Kaylee, as far as I'm concerned. Given
Well, if you take a look at the Mark IV Crusader, Mark IV Crusader will be killed by Kaylee's ability very quickly.
That's true. That is true. I did not have the wit to observe that. Thank you to my personal friend here. Unfortunately,
we are far enough in the game as well that he can just... What is this? He does not have enough mana for that. What is this?
He has, in fact, played First Seal of Rom. Has chosen to bring up 3 of very, very scary cards, honestly. I would say that, in my opinion, Andromeda may be the least scary of these options, although he's electing to give his opponent Jikra, the Great Equalizer, which is going to buy him some time, as he only has 5 mana, and Jikra costs 12.
The scary thing about Andromeda is that any combat damage dealt to the player by Andromeda causes him to immediately lose the game.
That is true. Unfortunately, he will not have a choice, as Unearth has been played to summon Andromeda to the field. Very strong play coming from EverCryTCG. A 5th mana Stone of Order has come to the board. Very interesting, very questionable. The question is, will he play an ally? He has 2 of them.
I don't think he has much of a choice at this point.
And as suspected, he is going to try buying himself some time with that Wall of Ice. In addition, he will be playing the Skeleton Key. If you ask me, that's a good play. Going to buy him an additional bit of value from that Wall of Ice, even if it won't be surviving for very long.
Especially if it won't be surviving for very long.
Additionally, throughout the game, you may see special icons on cards, such as Kaylee, who has a diamond icon. This is part of the new set 4 being worked on, which adds a new mechanic to the game known as Full House, in which you are able to expel ally cards rather than placing them in the discard, giving you one of 5 different suits known as diamonds, clubs, spades, hearts, and wilds, which can count as any, as you might imagine. And those give cards from set 5 special abilities, such as the Riddle Master, who may unlock the number of cards you can keep in your hand, which is normally set to 7. Looks like the Andromeda will be targeting Wall of Ice, whereas Kaylee will be targeting the player directly. We'll see if that resolves. I assume it would, since they do not have any mana to counter.
Nor any cards to do so.
Once again, taking some damage there from Skeleton Key, showing its small bit of value, but again, when not playing in a zombie deck, it is a interesting and possibly detrimental choice. Taking an additional 200 damage from Kaylee.
Now, he has to either draw an ally or play Mark IV Crusader in order to keep himself from immediately dying.
That is true.
It may not even matter, considering that Kaylee's ability is very playable at this point.
At this point, yes, it is up to whether or not EverCry decides to use Andromeda against the player directly, as they do have the ability to just destroy the Crusader. So I'm going to expect that this is the wrap for round 1 as we move into the second round, where they are able to sideboard some cards and create a more synergized deck against their opponents. As we expected, that ability is going to activate to destroy the Crusader, and Andromeda will attack him directly, causing him to instantly lose the game. Wonderful play in the early game and going on from EverCryTCG now. In my opinion, there was certainly a lot of problems with the mulliganing in the initial 5-card draw from Rat, in which he did top deck 2 Skeleton Keys and only ended up putting 1 into play, although that could have given him a slight bit of value.
All in all, it's not really the best.
Yeah, it appears we could, for the benefit of the doubt, say that Rat's deck is just having a slow to start strategy, as it is a 45 card deck with 11 mana stones. This is actually legal. There is a minimum limit on mana stones of 10 and a minimum on cards of 30. However, the maximum of cards is 60, and the maximum of mana stones, I believe, is 30. As nobody is surprised, there is going to be a Mana Stone of Order being put into play. Unfortunately, we do not
I
have
think that's
access.
all the mana stones that he has.
I concur. It appears there is some difficulty going on being able to reveal their hands. Hopefully that will be solved in moments here. 2 mana being put into play. We do not know what it is for. City Walls. That is actually, in my opinion, a very good card to access early on in the game, especially in your starting hand, as it does have that 800 health, giving you plenty of time to set up your next moves.
Although it looks like things will be off to a better start this round for Rat.
Yes, the Armored Tetrarch and Mark IV Crusader makes a return, in addition to Flash Freeze, which is an interesting
It looks like he's running ice counters as his water deck.
Yeah, as we've seen from Wall of Ice and Flash Freeze. 2 mana is going to be put into play for Rainbow Residuum, which will be able to produce a Dark and a Fire mana stone for EverCryTCG. 3 mana is going to be put into Mana Orb, which will allow them to create 2 mana, both on their turn and the enemy's turn. An interesting snap ability, to say the least. That, in my opinion, would work very well with the air card Red Alert, which we may see come up here in Rat's deck. Looks like EverCry is going to expend that Residuum to play Demonic Contract, where they will be able to retrieve a ally from their deck and add it to their hand after revealing it to the enemy. Unfortunately, this will destroy any duplicates in the deck, so as we hope and see, he will be choosing a legendary card, which will have no negative effects on his deck, that being Andromeda, and it will be added to his hand. I find it very interesting that in both the last game and this one, Andromeda has appeared to be the basis of this deck, getting him the win last time and having some promising looks this round. But it still seems that this would have been a zombie deck, although we have not seen much to support that other than the Door of the Undead.
Andromeda is a very strong card, for sure.
Very interesting in addition to that, being both a dark and a water card. Looks like he's going to be expending 3 mana. Nope, bringing that to 5. Playing the Mark IV Crusader, which will actually give a 100/100 buff to City Walls. Not to say that will do too much, but the extra health and slight bit of poking damage will be appreciated. Turn has been passed to EverCryTCG, who does have 5 mana at their disposal, now becoming 6. Looks like they will be expending 4 mana to put Andromeda into play, who does have the poisonous ability. Very powerful against allies.
As well as swordsmanship, which allows her to survive encounters that she normally would not.
That is actually a very interesting thing to add to a character who only has 100 attack, especially considering the poisonous, very specific uses for that. Looks like the Crusader is going to attempt to attack Andromeda. No! Unexpectedly, it is going to attack EverCryTCG directly for 600 if he does not block with Andromeda.
I believe this is due to Andromeda's swordsmanship, considering that the Mark IV Crusader would not be able to survive and would gain no benefit from attacking Andromeda directly.
That is true, which means that is indeed a value play, as they say, for...
Since City Walls still has Vanguard, Andromeda is forced to attack that first.
But once again, that poisonous is going to come to play once she does make that attack. Looks like 2 mana is going to be expended for the Floorboard Scuttler. Who has been put into play with the Death Wish. I assume that the thinking here is that the Floorboard will be able to block an attack from the Mark IV Crusader next turn. Flash Freeze has been played against Andromeda here, who is attempting to attack the City Walls. appears... Interesting choice. Demonic Contract has been played with its snap ability to retrieve Unearth. In my personal experience, this is the first time I've actually seen Demonic Contract being used on an opponent's turn rather than one's own.
Usually when that's the case, it's used to pull up another snap card. Does Unearth have snap on it?
Unearth does not have snap. I assume that was meant to ensure that Andromeda could come back regardless of what might happen to her. Unfortunately, she will take a frozen counter to her, which means she will have to exhaust herself before being able to attack. Compulsive Research has been drawn into Rat's deck. Interesting. Which will be played as soon as it is. Reveal the top 8 cards of your spellbook. Your opponent picks one of them, and you may pay X amount of gray mana. If you do, repeat this process X times. Except that opponent can't choose the same card twice. Put all cards by your chosen opponent in your hand, then shuffle your spellbook. A very interesting card put into play here. Looks like a very solid lineup of cards here. That being Mana Flux, the Vix Ambassador, Colonel B. Marshall, Handy Miscalculation, Righteous Smite, Toy Factory, Wall of Ice, and Arcane Revelation. Looks like Mana Flux has been chosen for the Compulsive Research card, which will be moved to his hand. And the rest of the cards will be put back into the deck and shuffled. Very interesting move, to say the least. Mana Flux will both come in handy for Rat, but also come against him, especially considering the dark water deck being based around snap spells and low mana allies.
He can potentially pull out round 2, though, if he continues to put frost counters on Andromeda, because that will effectively lock her down for the rest of the game.
That is true. Unfortunately, the freeze effect has been removed from her, as she has taken the turn to exhaust herself.
I do believe playing Mana Flux would be beneficial for Rat, especially since his cards are going to tend to be a higher cost, it looks like, than would be EverCryTCGs.
The good news here being that City Walls will guarantee one more round of safety from Andromeda. The Scuttler will be attacking City Walls to sacrifice itself such that it can activate its Death Wish ability, which is to search the spellbook for another ally card, discard, and shuffle the deck. Now you might think that this is not a beneficial play, although they are playing with Door of the Undead as well as Unearth, which means they will be able to retrieve them from their graveyard. He is going to be retrieving Red Wine Harlot, or Red Win Hairlet, depending on how you pronounce that. In all honesty, I am not too sure.
There's a lot of hair in that picture.
That is true. Unearth will be played to retrieve the Harlot from the graveyard. into play.
Now, this is interesting. It appears he may be trying to get rid of City Walls with that card. I don't know what City Walls' mana cost is, so I can't say if that would work or not.
The turn has once again returned to Rat, who will channel a 5th mana stone, giving him a total of 7 mana.
Can you confirm for me that City Walls has a mana cost of 2?
It does. It has a mana cost of specifically 2 air mana.
That means that it is going to be susceptible to the Redwyne Harlot's ability, removing it from combat when he declares attackers next, allowing Andromeda Dyrlaxian to attack him directly.
That is true. Let's see what is done in order to stop this. A second Armored Tetrarch has been played into his hand, which is very unfortunate considering it costs 8. The Crusader will make another attack to him directly, leaving him at only 2 HP. Such a close game for Rat, rather, not Garbage. Well, possibly Garbage. That's the point of this tournament. Ha ha ha! It appears that victory is within his grasp. Unfortunately, that Andromeda could end the game here and now. The Harlot will be attacking Rat directly, which doesn't deal combat damage, but it will force him to discard the top 4 cards from his deck. And Andromeda will attempt to attack him directly, although he does have the opportunity to sacrifice one of his cards.
And there is the Harlot's ability being activated to remove City Walls, as I predicted earlier.
Unfortunately.
It looks like Mark IV Crusader is going to have to block Andromeda, effectively removing all of the damage possible from the game. Here's a twist. Andromeda has been removed from play. I'm not entirely sure why.
I believe this is due to the fact that they both have swordsmanship, therefore effectively neither of them having it, which will kill Andromeda, although Andromeda's poisonous will activate, instantly killing the Crusader.
Mark IV Crusader has swordsmanship?
It has swordsmanship against allies with less attack than it. Andromeda only has 100 attack. Looks like they will draw Righteous Smite, which is actually very, very useful and very comforting card to have, especially later in the game when things such as Elder Gods get played, being able to banish them. It appears a misplay has taken place, as only 7 mana has been played for the Armored Tetrarch, but it costs 8. We will take a moment to confirm with the players, and as we are saying that, the mistake has been noticed and it has been returned to their hand. Unfortunately, EverCry does now have that information. Instead, 4 mana is going to be played Righteous Smite, which is going to be played against the Harlot, removing her from play. That will provide some level of stress relief for losing cards that may prove valuable later in the game. Interestingly enough, Mana Flux still has not been played, although it could be this turn. However, it has not, and it will turn to be EverCryTCG's turn, who will be drawing Gazul first of many. However, he will be playing 3 mana for First Seal of Rom. Once again, we are seeing this. Last game, it was very beneficial as Andromeda was discarded and able to be played that very same turn. Unfortunately, Andromeda has been returned to the graveyard along with one of the Unearth spells, so unless he is able to draw a second, we probably will not be seeing much of her the rest of this game. Door of the Undead will be played. Put into play 0/400 construct. A 6th mana stone of order will be put into play from Rat. And finally, we will be seeing that Armored Tetrarch.
It doesn't appear like the game is gone the way as intended for EverCryTCG.
Unfortunately not, with that Andromeda being discarded.
However, I do see a man with a shovel in that splash art. I do believe that may be some... Yep.
That will be used likely for Andromeda to bring her back. Unfortunately, this is the considerably pestering side of a zombie deck in which you just can't get rid of that which you dislike. On the plus side here for EverCry's opponent is that Rise Again may not be rebounded as only 1 dark mana remains untapped.
In addition, he does have the upper hand in board control, and okay, he's playing Mark IV Crusader.
Very interesting turn, unexpected to say the least, which will be buffing the Door of the Undead and the Floorboard Scuttler to having an additional...
There we go. Now he's going to bring the Andromeda back. Okay.
But we're not going to cut the part where I say we're going to cut that in post.
Okay.
There's just going to be an out-of-context conversation talking about cutting something out of post.
The listeners will have no idea what it was.
Oh, very interesting play in our absence. A second Armored Tetrarch has been played. The first one is going to target Door of the Undead. Very good play, as Door of the Undead can be used to a terrible effect when left
I do believe it would have been to EverCry's benefit to play that Andromeda using Door of the Dead. Undead.
Well,
not dead. Undead.
Unfortunately, Door of the Undead only affects zombie-counted allies, whereas Andromeda is an elf rogue. But again, it was additionally interesting that Rise Again was not used, which means it appears the only options he has left is to draw a second Unearth or Rise Again spell from his hand, being able to bring back...
Which he already had. It's interesting that he didn't choose to use it.
Looks like 2 mana is going to be played here. Nope. Change of plans. 5 mana has been played to summon TC the Tiny Terror, wherein 5 coins will be flipped. First is heads.
This could very, very easily just kill him.
That is very true.
He's down to 1 health.
A second tails, 2 more coin flips to go. Heads. It appears that EverCryTCG has been put to 0 from his own ally. Very interesting. I'm not sure if he was planning on this to happen.
Very interesting.
And just
it did have over a 60% chance of happening.
Unfortunately, because of that, he will lose the second round, meaning there score has gone to 1-1. Of course, this is best 2 out of 3, which means this will be the tiebreaker round. 2 Doors of Undead have been top-decked into his hand. Very interesting. I would assume that he will not be keeping both of them. Or either of them, for that fact. In addition to removing one of his resurrection spells. Red Alert and Loyal Warhorse, I think, will come in handy, especially in the early game here. Especially, in my opinion, Red Alert being good to surprise an enemy with its snap ability and block an attack. A second Red Alert has been mulliganed into his hand. Another interesting choice here is that Capital Punishment and Unearth have been seen once again in the starting hand of EverCryTCG. Mana Stone will be played, and a Mana Stone played in return.
See Rainbow Residuum again.
For Percival Rivers with an Intrigue 3. Very interesting choice. Second Mana Stone of Order will be played. And Loyal Warhorse will be put into play, saving those Red Alert snap abilities. Likely a better option. And the turn will be passed back to EverCryTCG.
Can you hover over Rainbow Residuum real quick?
Yes, I can. Rainbow Residuum. A 2-mana relic, which can be used to create 2 mana, although not on the same turn that it was played, as it enters exhausted. It will be chosen as producing a dark and an air mana for EverCryTCG. Another Mana Stone will be played. And 2 mana will be expended to play Compulsive Research. The second time we are seeing that in this matchup. Looks like the cards that have been drawn are Handy Miscalculation, Belt of Diamonds, Runic Examination, Ezraite Bauble, and a Scribe's Charm, as well as Arcane Revelation. I'm not entirely sure what will come of this. Looks like Belt of Diamonds will be added to his hand, as well as Arcane Revelation. And the rest being put back into the deck and shuffled. In the combat phase, Percival Rivers will be used to attack directly, but will be blocked by Loyal Warhorse, who will put a damage counter on Percival, killing the Warhorse, but being able to summon a 100/100 soldier ally. That token will be put into play. 2 mana will be expended to play Kaylee. And another mana stone will come into play. I need to ask, Lord Kyrus, what do you think the outcome of this tiebreaker match will be based on the current board?
It's hard to say, but based on the current board, I can say this is going to drag out for a little bit, which I believe may play into Rat's playstyle a little bit more.
That is true. We have actually had some conversation about the deck he is using in this tournament, and it is more of a late game option. That token.
Zombie decks tend to fall off a little bit after the mid game.
Especially when those Unearth, Resurrection, and various other card replay spells have been exhausted. Purse of Rivers will once again be attacking directly, however, will be stopped by the playing of both red alerts, which will put 4 100-100 allies into play.
Interesting move, playing both of those red alerts at once.
Indeed. One would think that only 2 would be needed to block the 2 allies, but 4 have been put into play, discarding both. Although Belt of Diamonds can be used to return those to his hand. Maybe that was part of his idea when he played both rather than one. And all 4 cards will finally make their way onto the battlefield. 2 of them blocking the anticipated attacks from Percival and Kaylee. Fortunately, that will put an end to Percival, as he is only a 200-200 ally and cannot sustain all too much damage. A second Rainbow Residuum we are seeing here being put into play. The first one, of course, being Dark and Air. This one will count as a Dark and a Fire. Of course, coming into play exhausted. The turn will be passed back to Rat, who doesn't have a very promising hand. Hopefully that Toy Factory will come into play before Belt of Diamonds.
His hand appears to be consisting of token building cards.
Yes. The question is, I would actually tend to agree with that, considering we have seen Colonel B. Marshall multiple times throughout this deck. Instead, Arcane Revelation will be played. Unfortunately, I do not believe they will be able to rebound. Well, they have the option to, but I don't think that's going to come up. Durza's Bodyguard. This is actually one of the legacy cards back from, I believe it was set 1, which has been remastered and added back to the game better than ever. Very good card against generally zombie decks and air decks, I would say, as it is able to block all attacks and negate all combat. When it is summoned, that is, which is why it has the snap ability, which is very interesting for an ally card. Looks like these human soldiers will be put to use attacking Kaylee and assumedly putting an end to her to the graveyard, and the last one attacking directly. Before she goes out, she will be activating her ability to get rid of one of those human soldiers, which will actually stop her from being killed, as only one of them has dealt combat damage to her. Turning to EverCry's turn, he will be playing Runic Examination to draw 2 cards from the top of his deck. That being Arcane Revelation and another Harlot, which looks like will be put into play. Well, Kaylee will be able to attack directly, as she has not actually made an attack herself, only using her ability, which means she will be able to do 200 damage to Rat. The Mana Stone is going to be drawn. Now, in my personal opinion, I would be playing that Runic Examination as well as the Toy Factory, but time will tell. He is going to spend 3 mana to play Runic Examination and draw a Wall of Ice as well as a Armored Tetrarch, which we have seen before, of course. Didn't prove to be too useful, although that could be due to the fact that it did not have very much time to be played before the terrible incident in which EverCry did put an end to his own life through the use of TC the Tiny Terror.
Interesting play, to be sure.
In the
Did not work
aftergame,
out well.
I would actually like to inquire if that was on purpose in an attempt to keep self-pride, or if it was an accident which was overlooked in the Frenzy battle. The human soldier will be making forward attack to EverCry directly, who will be taking it without blocking with the Harlot. Looks like an unfortunate misclick was played there, untapping all of his cards. However, it has been rectified, and the turn has been passed to EverCryTCG, who has drawn Door of the Undead. The Harlot will be attacking him directly. Unfortunately, it has been forgotten that Wall of Ice was put into play. I'm actually somewhat confused here. Was Wall of Ice not put into play? Because it appears the Harlot did make an attack directly. So I'm unsure what Wall of Ice has business for on the field if it is not in play. Perhaps it is the Harlot's ability activating. Wall of Ice will be put back into play despite the Harlot's actions last round. Another Mana Stone will be played, bringing Rat to 7 mana. Only
Just 1 mana away from his Armored Tetrarch.
Indeed. My wondering is when or if Toy Factory and Belt of Diamonds will come into play, as they've been in his hand for quite some time.
I haven't been paying too careful attention to his mana, but he's been leading some each turn, correct?
I do believe he has. Perhaps that's for the sake of Durza's bodyguard. Honestly, somewhat a neck-and-neck game right now, with Rat only leading by a short margin of health, and the board being quite balanced, except for the continuous blocking of Wall of Ice. However, as we expected, Durza's bodyguard will be put into play, negating all combat phase actions, which means the Wall of Ice will, in fact, not be removed from play, I believe. Looks like Andromeda will be put into play now, with 2 floorboard scuttlers in the hand, which is very interesting and somewhat ironic, if you ask me. Turn has returned to Rat, who will be playing another Mana Stone, now having 8, assumedly to play that Armored Tetrarch.
Now would be the time to play that Toy Factory that Andromeda Dorlaxian has entered the field, because it would allow him to create a token each turn, which he could use to consistently stop Andromeda Dorlaxian from winning the game.
That is true.
I do think he is going to favor the Armored Tetrarch, however.
Especially considering that not only does he have the 2 tokens in Wall of Ice, but he has Durza's bodyguard, meaning he has enough allies that the Harlot won't be able to do too terribly much with her ability. Looks like they are taking a moment to assess their options.
He may be having the same debate we're having.
My personal opinion, the Armored Tetrarch should be put into play beforehand, with the following turn being used for Toy Factory and Belt of Diamonds.
I would agree with that. However, it doesn't look like he's spending all of his mana. Yep, here comes Toy Factory.
In a turn of events, Toy Factory will be put out before, rather than the Armored Tetrarch, and an additional 3 to put Belt of Diamonds into play. That belt will be very useful in retrieving some important and key spell cards, such as the Red Alert cards or Runic Examination, which will give him an edge later in the game, assuming he is able to keep that Belt of Diamonds without it being destroyed, which I don't believe that EverCry has the ability to do. Taking a moment now, I assume, to look for the token that will be summoned from Toy Factory, which is a 100/100 construct with flying, which is very unorthodox, but potentially very helpful in dealing some damage to the player directly without being stopped. A substitute card has been put into play, a Spirit. However, that will be recounted as a construct for the sake of the game. The turn will be passed back to EverCry. Who will be drawing an Arcane Revelation from his hand. Now, in my opinion, the Arcane Revelation might actually be a good card to rebound right now, considering the 2 floorboard scuttlers in his hand, although he might have bigger and greater plans for those. And as expected, Arcane Revelation has been put into play, giving him Runic Examination and First Seal of Rom. Both very, very powerful utilities at this point in the game, as things have reached somewhat of a stalemate. He will not be rebounding it to his hand, and instead being Able to put the Floorboard Scuttler into play, as well as activating the first seal of Rom. We will have to wait and see what it is he pulls from his deck to let the enemy choose from. However, I suspect it will be 3 Elder Gods. Gazul, first of many, of course, being the first. Lamia, last Kados. This is, again, one of the 4th edition, or set 4 cards. Interesting, only 1 Elder God has been chosen, as well as another Harlot. Looks like Gazul will be chosen as the kept card, which is a dangerous play, but at the same time, the best option considering that EverCry
He only has
6
yeah.
mana to be played, whereas Gazul costs 11. So as long as that card is kept in mind, that it's in his hand, hopefully Mana Flux will not be played in this game. Turning to the combat phase now, the Harlot will be activating her ability once again on the Wall of Ice and attempting to attack directly, initiating that intrigue. However, it looks like the human soldier will be blocking. Or attempting to. Andromeda will be used against Durza's bodyguard, and Percival will be used to attack directly. As we wait for this encounter to be resolved, I would like to bring attention to the Discord for the SpellSlingers card game, which you can find a link to in the description, where you will be able to find a very helpful player base who you can find some very enjoyable games with. Looks like combat phase has resolved. The Harlot and Percival Rivers have made their attacks, being blocked by the human soldiers. And the turn returning to Rat.
This game does appear to be taking a turn in EverCry's direction.
That is true, although the Tetrarch will be coming out, I would hope, this turn with no other option revealing itself to Rat. Additionally, that ability on it might give him just the edge that he needs, being able to generate an extra 300 bonus to the Tetrarch if he is the only one to attack. In fact, that would mean he gains a passive 100 even if all his allies, or all his token allies are gone, as the Wall of Ice would give him a buff, as it is not able to attack. Which is a nice safety net, if you ask me. Belt of Diamonds will be expended here rather than the Armored Tetrarch. Very interesting play. Looks like...
So allow him to put some more tokens onto the board.
Yes, I would assume that Red Alert is going to make a return, although Runic Examination or Arcane Revelation are not the worst ideas. Compulsive Research. Certainly not what I expected.
This potentially does allow him to draw even more cards, however, as he's going to repeat this process an additional 5 times. This will, however, cause him to run out of cards in his deck, I believe.
Looks like the cards just kind of went wherever they chose to. However, he will be reordering them. Mana Flux making its appearance. Hopefully he has the realization not to use that. A second Toy Factory, as well as Counter Charm, a second Belt of Diamonds, Arcane Revelation, and City Walls. And finally, the Vix Ambassador, who, in my opinion, can likely be overlooked. He will be able to keep the Mana Flux, the Belt of Diamonds. Wait to see what else comes from this. Arcane Revelation. Toy Factory. And that seems to be it. Unfortunately, that does not help Rat very much, as he already has both a Belt of Diamonds and a Toy Factory in play. He will be able to put that second Belt of Diamonds out to create another token. However, that is about the extent of value he has gotten from...
Playing an additional Toy Factory will allow for additional tokens to be played
That
as
is
well.
true. They do stack in their abilities. I did not think about that. Looks like the human soldier will be targeting Percival Rivers, who will be killed, as well as, I believe, the human soldier.
I believe Percival Rivers was tapped and unable
Yes.
to attack back.
Unfortunately, I did not have the eyesight to see that. We're professionals here. Only the best content.
We do not get paid.
We're working on union.
It's just us.
Nobody else.
Doesn't have much weight.
But I can tell you what, we have a wonderful team spirit. Harlot, once again, and very unoriginally, if you ask me, will be used against Wall of Ice and attempt to activate Intrigue. And Andromeda will be attempting to attack directly. Let's see if he can block with any of his allies. If not, this will be game.
He will be able to block with his token. Floorboard Scuttler can't attack the token because it is flying.
Actually, contrary to that, flying has been changed, and it can only stop enemies from blocking you from attacking directly. However, the Floorboard Scuttler cannot deal damage to the spirit, which means it should, in theory, be able to block Andromeda.
Some deliberation going on, I believe, about whether or not he can actually block that card.
This is important and must be resolved in the correct manner, as it is the result in between a win or a loss this turn.
In any case, I do believe that this game has gone south for Rat fairly quickly.
Things reaching a stalemate in the early game, and unfortunately he will not be able to use the construct to block Andromeda. I assume this is because the Floorboard Scuttler is technically able to attack the spirit or the construct despite having no attack modifier, leaving it unable to block Andromeda, causing this to be game, unfortunately, for Rat, moving EverCry to the next bracket. Congratulations. Good game to both involved. And
Very interesting decks from both.
yeah, and definitely unfortunate play, especially later in the game with that compulsive research, giving him almost entirely copies of cards that he's already had into play, which he was unfortunately not able to utilize in the
I
slightest.
do, however, see some very strong synergies between having decks that can create a massive amount of tokens and having a flying dragon that gets additional attack and health from each ally that you control in the field. Combined with those tokens, it would be a very powerful asset if he could get it up and running.
Yes, he does have a very theoretically powerful deck. Unfortunately, he did not find the draws he needed and was just pressured too much by cards such as the Harlot and Andromeda to make moves that he was not comfortable with. Which means, once again, this will be the victory in EverCry's favor. We thank you for tuning into this video. We will have more videos in the future covering upcoming matches from more players in the brackets, including myself, who will be going against one Henri. If you know him, you know him. Anyways, thanks once again. Leave a comment on anything that you found interesting in this video, or battle rather. And once again, note that there is a link to the Discord in the description, which you can use to find a very helpful and friendly community of SpellSlingers players, including myself, EverCryTCG, Kyverus, and many more. Bye!